The Houses of Parliament witnessed one of the most explosive Prime Minister's question sessions in recent memory as Keir Starmer found himself completely cornered over the spectacular collapse of the China spy case. The Labour leader's attempts to deflect blame spectacularly backfired, leaving him looking weak, evasive, and desperately out of his depth on matters of national security. The drama began even before Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch could launch her first attack. In an unprecedented move that screamed desperation, Starmer made a pre-prepared statement before questions had even begun, attempting to get ahead of the narrative.
So can I welcome the government's ambition to get 2/3 of our young people into an apprenticeship, further education or university, and ask the Prime Minister what he will do to ensure that every young person in East Worthing and Shoreham has the skills they need to thrive?
Thank him for his question. We want a country where young people are supported, where the quality of teaching is raised and every skilled apprentice is valued and respected. We've set a new target of 2/3 of young people to be in apprenticeships or university. That will smash the glass ceiling and renew our country. Mr. Speaker, we've supported this with record £3 billion budget for more apprenticeships, more technical colleges and guaranteed training, apprenticeship or work for all 18 to 21-year-olds.
The opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for marking 4 years since the terrible murder of Sir David Amess. I know that the whole House will want to join me in remembering our former colleague. He is very much still in our hearts and minds. The way he died reminds us that the security of members and this Parliament is paramount. So it concerns us all that the case against two people spying on members of this House has collapsed. It is simply unbelievable. Exactly as I expected, the Prime Minister had to be dragged out at the top of PMQs to give a statement that answers no questions. I don't know what they're laughing. I don't know what they're laughing at. We are talking about the security of this Parliament. He had to be dragged out to repeat only more obfuscation.
But this tactical blunder only served to highlight just how much trouble he was in. The Prime Minister claimed he was deeply disappointed by the case's collapse and announced he would publish witness statements, but his defensive posture was already crystal clear. The case at the heart of this political earthquake involves two British men, Christopher Cash, a former parliamentary researcher with close ties to senior Conservative MPs, and Christopher Barry, a teacher. Both were charged with espionage offenses under the Official Secrets Act, accused of passing sensitive information to Chinese intelligence services between 2021 and 2023. The Crown Prosecution Service alleged they provided the Chinese state with information that could be useful to an enemy, a charge that carries serious implications for national security. But here's where the story takes a devastating turn. Our Starmer's government. The case collapsed in September, just weeks before it was due to go to trial, because the Crown Prosecution Service said the government had failed to provide sufficient evidence, proving China was a threat to national security at the time of the alleged offenses. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Stephen Parkinson, revealed that prosecutors had spent many months trying to obtain the necessary evidence from the government, but it simply wasn't forthcoming. The technical legal requirement centers around the Official Secrets Act's definition of an enemy. For a successful prosecution, the government needed to demonstrate that China represented a national security threat to the UK during the period when the alleged spying took place. Despite multiple witness statements provided by Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Collins, none explicitly stated that China was considered a threat to national security at the time of the offenses. Parkinson's letter to parliamentary committees laid bare the government's failure. He explained that while there was sufficient evidence when charges were originally brought in April 2024, a precedent set by another spying case earlier in the year had raised the threshold for conviction. This earlier case involved Bulgarian nationals found guilty of spying for Russia, and it established that the prosecution needed clear evidence that the foreign state in question was classified as a threat to national security. Kemi Badenoch came to Prime Minister's questions loaded for bear, and she didn't disappoint. The Conservative leader systematically dismantled Starmer's position, calling the case collapse simply unbelievable and demanding to know how the government could have failed so spectacularly. Her accusation that the situation stunk of a cover-up struck right to the heart of public concerns about transparency and competence. Badenoch's most devastating line of attack focused on Starmer's legal credentials. She mockingly asked what was the point of having a lawyer rather than a leader as Prime Minister if he couldn't even get the law right on a matter of national security.
In 2021, the previous government's integrated review described China as the biggest state-based threat to the UK's economic security. In 2024, the Minister for Security said from that dispatch box that China poses a threat. But let's leave aside the government. In 2022, the Director General of MI5 in November classified China as a threat in his remarks. How is it possible that the government failed to provide the evidence that the CPS needed to prosecute?
The substantive evidence was provided in 2023 by the previous government. That is when the witness statement was submitted. I am going to disclose it. They will all be able to read it. The substantive evidence was written and disclosed and submitted in 2023 under the last government. I noticed she didn't indicate whether ministers were involved in that at the time. Mr. Speaker, she questions what's in the review, the refreshed review in 2021 and 2023. Let me be clear. The then Foreign Secretary, sitting I think over here, the Honourable Member for Braintree, 1 month after the arrest, so absolutely the relevant time, gave a speech at Mansion House. It was called Our Position on China, setting out the government's policy. He said in that speech, summing up China as a threat in one word would be, his words, impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise.
This personal attack clearly rattled Starmer, who responded with his own sneering comment that she was clearly not a lawyer or a leader. But his defensive reaction only reinforced the impression that he was floundering under pressure. The Conservative leader also highlighted a crucial contradiction in the government's narrative. She pointed out that the two individuals were charged under a Conservative government but let off under Labour, suggesting that something fundamental had changed in how the case was being handled. This timeline is particularly damaging for Starmer because it implies that his government actively undermined a prosecution that the previous administration had deemed viable. Starmer's attempts to shift blame back to the Conservative government proved equally disastrous. He tried to argue that the Conservatives had failed to classify China as a threat when they were in office, making the prosecution impossible. He even quoted previous statements by Badenoch herself, where she had said Britain should not describe China as a foe.
Let me be clear. The then Foreign Secretary, sitting I think over here, the Honourable Member for Braintree, 1 month after the arrest, so absolutely the relevant time, gave a speech at Mansion House. It was called Our Position on China, setting out the government's policy. He said in that speech, summing up China as a threat in one word would be, his words, impossible, impractical, and most importantly, unwise. Foreign Secretary, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't just him. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition was Business Secretary at the time. In September 23, the Leader of the Opposition said, her words, September 23, the relevant year, her words, we should certainly not be describing China as a foe.
But this strategy backfired spectacularly because it highlighted his own government's failure to rectify the situation once they took power. The political implications of this failure are staggering.
Two individuals seeking to extract information from us. And the government's response is not, as mine was, do everything you can to make sure the prosecution works, but no, process. Well, who the hell's side are you on? This isn't about the bureaucracy, this is about leadership. We're not sent here to be civil servants, we're sent here to lead the country and to make decisions. And instead, and I feel nothing but fondness for the Minister in his place, and I'm very sorry that he's been sent out on his, not quite first outing, but pretty close. It is on his first outing to defend the indefensible. Because what he's got the position of doing now is to effectively say that he's not a politician, he's a bureaucrat, there's nothing he can do, and frankly, he shouldn't even be here in the first place. Because that seems to be the Prime Minister's line. former Attorneys General have got up and they have prosecuted on the state's behalf. This Attorney General and this Prime Minister have said, not on my watch, not worth the effort.
Here we have a case involving alleged Chinese espionage at the highest levels of British politics, with one of the accused having direct access to senior Conservative MPs and sensitive parliamentary information. The collapse sends a dangerous message to foreign intelligence services that the UK lacks the political will to defend itself against espionage operations. The Prime Minister's claim that no minister or special advisor had played any role in providing evidence rang hollow in the face of mounting questions about meetings between senior officials. When pressed about whether Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Collins had discussed the case with National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell, Starmer's answer was unconvincing. He claimed Collins had acted independently, but then admitted he would need to double-check whether other conversations had taken place. This uncertainty about such a crucial detail exposed the chaos at the heart of the government's handling of the case. How can the Prime Minister not know definitively whether his most senior security advisors discussed a case of such national importance? The admission that he needed to verify basic facts about the decision-making process suggested either incompetence or deliberate obfuscation. The role of Jonathan Powell, Starmer's national security advisor, has become increasingly controversial throughout this saga. Initially, fingers were pointed at Powell for allegedly refusing to provide robust enough statements to the Crown Prosecution Service. While it later emerged that the statements were actually written by Matthew Collins, questions remain about Powell's influence over the process and his meetings with other senior officials about the case.
And of course, we are forced to believe by Keir Starmer and his hoods that this guy acted completely and utterly on his own. Matthew Collins decided that he didn't want to cooperate with prosecutors in a very, very, what you might call sensitive public prosecution of spies inside the, as I said, the Palace of Westminster. It just beggars belief. It's nonsense, isn't it?
It's complete nonsense. I mean, I'm sanctioned, as you said earlier. I've also had spies involved with me from China, wolf warriors as they're called, low-level people impersonating me. Others have as well. This has been going on forever. The key thing was this: he didn't actually even have to say enemy. All they had to say was that it was perceived that China posed a threat. It's a very simple, low bar to set. The evidence right at the beginning, he's trying to say that the Conservatives didn't have this and therefore it was down to them that it failed. Not at all. Because the case went ahead when the Conservatives were in power because the MI5, all the institutions said categorically they pose a threat. In fact, MI5 said they pose the greatest threat to the freedom of the United Kingdom. All they had to do was confirm that and say that they continue to believe China posed a threat. So, you know, the old twisted can't lie straight in bed man himself, he then absolutely refused to do this. Why? Because they're kissing the backside of China at the moment because they want a trade arrangement and they were desperately worried that China would get really hacked off with them for prosecuting them for spying. And the second thing is we've got this ghastly, excuse me, I won't swear, the embassy, a huge mega embassy, the largest in Europe, and they're going to drive that one through while they're at it as well with 200 extra spies in the United Kingdom. This is a government that should be arraigned.
Particularly damaging are reports of a secret meeting in September between Powell and Foreign Office Permanent Secretary Oliver Robbins to discuss the trial. Starmer dismissed this as a red herring and accused Badenoch of making scurrilous allegations, but his vehement denials only drew more attention to the meeting and raised questions about what was discussed and why it was kept secret. The published witness statements themselves tell a troubling story of governmental confusion and mixed messaging. Collins acknowledged in his statements that Chinese intelligence services were highly capable, able, and conducted large-scale espionage operations against the UK designed to advance Chinese state interests and harm UK security. However, he also emphasized the government's commitment to pursuing a positive relationship with China, creating a fundamental contradiction that undermined the prosecution. The first statement, produced in December 2023 under the Conservative government, warned of China's espionage capabilities but stopped short of explicitly labeling China a national security threat. The second statement, written in February 2024, described China as an authoritarian state with different values to the UK, but again failed to meet the legal threshold required for prosecution. Even a third statement provided in August 2025, well into Labour's tenure, couldn't bridge the crucial gap in the evidence. This progression of statements reveals a government that understood the threat posed by Chinese espionage, but lacked the political courage to state it clearly for legal purposes. The revelation that the evidence was reportedly 95% of the way there, but missing that crucial 5%, makes the failure even more frustrating. Such a small gap in the evidence could have been easily addressed by a government committed to seeing justice done. The broader implications of this failure extend far beyond the immediate case. MI5 Director General Ken McCallum expressed his frustration at the collapse, noting in his annual address that China presents a daily threat to UK security. His comments about the need to defend resolutely against security threats while seizing opportunities that serve the nation highlighted the delicate balance required in dealing with China. McCallum's frustration is shared by many in the security services who have worked tirelessly to investigate Chinese espionage operations, only to see their efforts undermined by political considerations. The message this sends to intelligence officers and their sources is deeply damaging, suggesting that their work may not be supported when it reaches the highest levels of government. The case has also raised serious concerns about the protection of Parliament itself. House of Commons Speaker Lindsay Hoyle expressed his anger and disappointment at the trial's collapse, saying he felt Parliament wasn't getting the protection it deserved. His comments reflected the broader concern that if alleged spies with access to parliamentary information can escape prosecution, it undermines the security of the entire democratic system. For Conservative MPs like Alicia Kearns, who had direct contact with Christopher Cash through her role as chairwoman of the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee, the case's collapse has personal implications. Kearns revealed disturbing details about how Cash's alleged activities could have compromised not just British politicians, but also Chinese dissidents, Uyghurs, and Hong Kong activists who had fled Chinese persecution. The potential for blackmail and intimidation of these vulnerable individuals makes the prosecution failure even more serious. The political damage to Starmer's government from this debacle cannot be overstated. Here is a prime minister who came to office promising competence and integrity, yet his government has presided over the collapse of a major national security prosecution. His attempts to blame the previous administration ring hollow when his own government had months to address the evidential gaps, but apparently chose not to do so. The timing of the case's collapse is particularly suspicious, coming just weeks before the trial was due to begin. This suggests that the problems with the evidence were known well in advance, but that decisive action was not taken to address them. The question remains whether this was due to incompetence, political considerations, or a deliberate decision to allow the case to fail. Starmer's performance at Prime Minister's questions did nothing to dispel these concerns. His defensive posture, evasive answers, and personal attacks on Badenoch suggested a leader under pressure who lacked convincing explanations for his government's failures. The promise to publish witness statements, while welcome for transparency, felt like too little, too late. The broader context of UK-China relations makes this failure even more significant. At a time when Western nations are grappling with how to respond to increasing Chinese assertiveness and espionage activities, the UK has sent a message of weakness and indecision. Other allies will be watching closely to see whether Britain can be trusted to take tough decisions when national security is at stake. The case also highlights the challenges facing the UK's legal system in adapting to modern espionage threats. The official Secrets Act, dating back to 1911, may not be fit for purpose in dealing with sophisticated state actors who operate in gray zones between cooperation and hostility. However, this systemic challenge doesn't excuse the government's failure to work within the existing legal framework to secure convictions. As the political fallout continues, Starmer faces mounting pressure to provide a full account of his government's role in the case's collapse. The publication of witness statements may answer some questions, but it's likely to raise many more about the decision-making processes and political considerations that led to this debacle. The Conservative opposition has already indicated they will not let this matter rest, with Badenoch promising to continue pressing for answers about the role of senior officials and the potential involvement of ministers. The suggestion that the decision to drop charges came from the top implies political interference that could be deeply damaging if proven. For the intelligence and security services, this case represents a significant setback in their efforts to counter foreign espionage. The message to potential sources and informants is that even when cases reach the prosecution stage, political considerations may ultimately undermine their efforts. This could have long-lasting effects on the UK's ability to detect and disrupt future espionage operations. The China spy case collapse will likely be remembered as a defining moment for Starmer's leadership on national security issues. His government's handling of the situation has raised fundamental questions about competence, transparency, and political will that will be difficult to overcome. The Prime Minister's attempts to deflect blame and avoid responsibility have only reinforced the impression of a leader who is out of his depth when faced with the complex challenges of modern statecraft. As this story continues to unfold, one thing is certain: the collapse of the China spy case represents a serious failure of the British states to protect itself against foreign espionage. Whether this failure was due to legal technicalities, political cowardice, or systemic incompetence, the result is the same. Alleged foreign agents have escaped justice, and Britain's reputation as a nation that will defend itself against espionage has been seriously damaged. The full consequences of this failure may not be known for years, but the immediate political impact on Starmer's leadership is already clear for all to see.